found myself thanking God several times this week. We baptized 37 people last Sunday, and that deserves another clap this morning. So, God gets all the glory, for sure. But you might not have thought about this. Every single one of you is why that happened. Because people don't just come to a service and then make a decision. What happens is they have different encounters along the way. And many times they see the people greeting them at the door, letting them know this is a welcoming place. Other times there's spaces provided for their children so they can come and just explore more about the teachings of Jesus. There's just so many of you that were involved, so many that were involved last week. And so I just want to say thank you to those of you who surrender your time each and every week to serve this church because you love this church and you want to see followers of Jesus made. We don't have 37 decisions without daily decisions by you. So I couldn't be more proud to be a part of this church. And so thank you. Thank you for that. Quick show of hands, okay? All right. How many of you right now in your life would say that you are busy? Okay, great. Those of you that are not, come up here and tell us how it's done. So most of you said that you're busy or you feel busy. Let me just ask, here, let's keep this going. How many of you feel like you got everything you wanted to get done this weekend done? Raise your hand. Ooh. Oh, a couple people. Awesome. I love it. Okay. How many of us would say that in the last 5 to 10 years, we've gotten busier than we were? So we feel busier than we did 5 or 10 years ago. Anybody want to raise their hand on that one? Okay. Now that can happen for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you just had more kids. Don't do it. No. That's going to make you busier, right? Maybe you were really good at your job and were handed more responsibility and now you're busier. Like they say, more money, more problems, So now maybe you've gotten a lot of resources, and now you got to figure out what to do with all of that. That's taking some of your time. The world has sped up, hasn't it? Like it feels faster. You just kind of feel like we're all going through whiplash every day just by waking up and doing whatever. Maybe things have gotten busier at work. Maybe your calendar's been filled up. You have more things to do. And sometimes, we plan to do things, and we have schedules and calendars, and we feel busy, but then unexpected things happen that we didn't plan on doing, which is isn't it like the worst? You're like, oh my gosh, like that happened to me about 5 weeks ago. I was having fun riding a four-wheeler on my vacation, and I flipped the four-wheeler over and broke my elbow, and because of that, it put me behind, and then I got all these other things added to my list, like doctor's appointments, physical therapy, and then I have to apparently multiple times a day do stretches and exercises. And I just found myself feeling frustrated because I already had a lot to do. Now I have something that's setting me back, and I have to do things to take care of that. So we all feel busy. We all feel busy. We're adding things. The world's faster. Unexpected things happen. And a recent Wall Street Journal poll a few years ago asked the question, what is it that Americans value most? And they came up, there's top 4. There was more, but these were the top 4. What we value most is hard work. We work hard. Our calendars are full. We're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, sometimes more than one job, sometimes things on the side. We value that. We also value tolerance as a country because the only way to keep the big, great economy going in this democracy is to learn how to get along together, and that takes a lot of effort and a lot of HR trainings and handbooks and all that kind of stuff. So it just takes a lot of our time. We're busy doing that. We value financial security. We're working so hard, we're so busy. A big reason why is because we want that bank account to go up. And also we value self-fulfillment. And so what all this means is many of us are busy, many of us have full schedules because we are after really one thing. All this adds up to one thing, and that's happiness. Think about it. The reason why you decide to do what you're doing, the biggest why behind all of that, the biggest why behind how you spend your time is really all about this elusive idea of happiness, of getting to a place of fulfillment. most of us would agree that this is the busiest time in history, probably. There's so much hustling. We're doing so many things. Why? To be happy. We're going after it. We're pursuing it. So let me ask a question. As you have become busier, are you becoming happier? It's a good moment for us to just pause. We're so busy a lot of times because we're trying to, chase our desires and our dreams and, make things so great. But are we losing what we're actually chasing after in the chase? As you're getting busier, are you becoming happier? We're going to talk about our third decision in this series, 7 decisions that can change your life. And like we've talked about every week, we're going to hand you a decision, and it's up to you. If you want to see a change, there's only one way. You have to make a decision, and we'll get to that decision here in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk to you about a time that Jesus was teaching the crowds. He's teaching the crowds, and then an unhappy man sort of interrupts his teaching and just shouts at him. What's he unhappy about? Well, let's find out. Luke chapter 12, verse 13 and 14 says, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' Jesus replied," you got to love Jesus' responses when people say things like this to him, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And so this next few verses we're going to be working through this morning, but what we start with is a man who's unhappy. And because he's unhappy, he essentially shouts out to Jesus, "I'm not happy, I'm not getting what I want. He's not being fair with me." And ultimately what he wants is part of the inheritance. Maybe there's some good reasons behind that, but he probably just wants the material gain of that as well. What he looks at Jesus and he says, "Fix my problem. Because on the other side of this getting sorted out, then I'll be happy." In usual Jesus fashion, he starts to unpack some truths whenever somebody brings a teachable moment to him. And in this case, he teaches us some things about happiness. Verse 15 says, "Then he said to them," so he takes this moment of this one person who's unhappy, who thinks that when this inheritance gets settled, he'll be happy. He says to everybody there, he says, "Watch out." Whenever Jesus says watch out, do you think we should watch out? Okay, just making sure. "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist," what a statement. Life is not about. Happiness isn't. Fulfillment isn't. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That's what he tells them. In other words, more of possessions, more of anything, more of any resource will not do it for you. It will not make you happy. It will not fulfill you. Because greed, as Jesus is teaching us, greed always impedes a life of happiness. That's what the truth that Jesus is teaching us. And happiness, one article defined happiness as an emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, satisfaction, contentment, and fulfillment. That's what happiness is. That all sounds great, doesn't it? That's what we want. That's what we're after. That's what we're busy for. But greed is a felt desire that having or consuming more of anything, now that's going to be what makes us happy. And many of us don't realize it, but some of that is at work in us every day. What's interesting is there was a study called The Paradoxical Effects of Valuing Happiness, and here's what they found. People who tend to value happiness most, they tended to feel least satisfied with their lives. That's really interesting. And part of that has to do with this idea of greed. And Jesus doesn't just talk about one kind. Did you notice he says all kinds of greed? Wait a second. There's more than one kind? Apparently so. And he's centering in on one kind of greed as he's talking to them. Now, lots of change in our culture. Like we said, things have sped up. We feel busier. We still have traditional greed. And as I'm teaching today, you might need to be thinking about that because you may think that getting more of something, that's really what's going to do it for you. And it's not. That's what Jesus is teaching. But I want to talk a little bit about a new kind of greed that has emerged that I want to just handle a little bit today. And I think I'm going to have to work hard to change your view on your abundance of this resource that I think you have a lot of, that I think I have a lot of. And it's the often quoted reason of why you're not able to do something that's important. Here it is. I don't have time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. If you find yourself saying, I don't have time, begin to wonder if that's true, and is underneath that one of the kinds of greed that Jesus might be insinuating. So like I said, I think I need some time to convince you. So I need a little bit of your time right now, and then we're going to unpack Jesus' teaching. But I want to reference a Harvard Business School, research that was done by Ashley Willens. It's called Buying Time Promotes Happiness. And here's what she writes and her team wrote in their findings. Despite rising income, so people are getting more finances, people around the world are feeling increasingly pressed for time. Undermining well-being, we show that the time famine, which is crazy to think that we put the word famine and time together, of modern life can be reduced. So we can actually feel better about this when we use our money to buy time. So in other words, she's saying more people wish that, and this time probably than ever, that they wish they had more time than maybe more money because they have enough money. Maybe that's not true for you, but for a lot of us, what we're really wanting more of a resource, we want more time. So she wrote, people who spent money to buy themselves time, such as by outsourcing disliked tasks, reported greater overall life satisfaction. So people who were putting their money to work, buying themselves time, were more happy. There has been a wild shift in my lifetime, first time ever, maybe. Time is becoming more valuable to us than our money. And so here's how we think in our subconscious. The more time I have, the happier I will be. The more time I have. The reason why I'm not happy is because I don't have the time to do what I want to do. I don't have the time for the things that I want to do. I don't have time for all the experiences that bring me pleasure. And once I get that time to do those things, then I'll finally be happy. I want to give you one more form of research. It was actually sort of a prophetic essay written in 1930, just months after the 1929 stock market crash that led to the Great Depression. Is written by an economist named John Maynard Keynes. And the title of this essay, it's a brilliant essay because he essentially looked back and said 100 years later, this is what things are going to be like in the middle of a Great Depression. And it's called The Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. Here's what he wrote. In quite a few years, in our own lifetime, we may be able to perform all the operations of agriculture, mining, and manufacture with a quarter of the human effort to which we have been accustomed. That's a bold prediction in 1930, essentially saying that within 100 years, we're going to have 4 to 8 times more time in our lives because we were going to invent some technologies and things are going to happen to give us more time. So he started sort of looking out, kind of predicting the time that we're in now. And here's what he wrote. He says, from pressing economic cares, so do we have enough money, how to occupy the leisure which science and compound interest will have won for him. And then pay attention to this. This becomes the chief issue, according to his paper. How to live wisely and agreeably and well becomes our focus. What do we do with our time? What do we do with our leisure? What do we do with all this extra time? And then he says, there will still be many people with intense, unsatisfied purposiveness. I think I said that right. Try to say that 3 times fast. So amazingly, in maybe one of the greatest financial problematic times of our country, Keynes looks out and he says, there's going to be a time where people don't worry as much about money as much as they worry about their time. There's going to be a time where we have more time than ever in human history. Essentially, he says, how we use our time will determine if we're happy because of the amount of financial, breathing room we've had, maybe more than any culture, any civilization in human history. So, you know this. We have more time-saving things out there than ever before. My favorite is Walmart pickup. There's nothing I don't like more than going into Walmart and trying to find stuff. Just pull up, open it up, drop it in, and go. We're seeing time-saving advancements. We see all the things happening with AI. We have Amazon. Your microwave saves so much time. You don't even think about that anymore because it's such a normal part of your life. Technology has just enhanced our ability to do things faster and quicker. So, we seemingly have enough resources to survive. We have more time than ever before. Why are we not happy? And I'll tell you why. We don't have a time problem. You think you have a time problem. I think I have a time problem. We don't have a time problem. What do we have? We have a greed problem. We have a greed problem. The problem isn't a lack of time. What's happened is we don't view time correctly, and we've also developed an inability to use the time that we have wisely. And that's really what it comes down to. The time you have, you can use it wisely or you can use it foolishly. And so as we read the rest of Jesus' teaching, he's going to share with us a parable, and he's going to talk about, an abundance. And I want you to imagine right now that you have an abundance of time. You really do. More than anybody ever in human history, right now we have an abundance of time. And so what we're going to look at is 3 signs of time greed. And then at the end, I'm going to give you one decision to get rid of it if you so choose. Let's take a look at verse 16. And he told them in this parable, so Jesus is about to teach us some really timeless truths. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest, which is what we're experiencing with time right now. We are experiencing an abundant harvest based on years and years of technology advancements, and we don't even have to do tasks we used to have to do. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. I want to pause here and just say this, okay? For most of human history, okay, people never asked, what shall I do? But we do all the time, subconsciously. People didn't have the luxury or the leisure to say, how am I going to spend my 5 hours? But man, we do. How am I going to spend this vacation time? How am I going to spend this hour I have in the morning? We've had so many tasks and so many things, that have been taken away from us. You have to understand, why is it so hard then to feel like we have time? And part of it is these signs of time greed that have shown up as a result of all of this leisure. The first thing that's happened in our culture is one of the signs of time greed is we have increased options now. We've come up with all kinds of ways to fill our time. Think about it. You can do whatever you want. You can get in your car and you can drive wherever you want pretty quickly and do whatever activity you want. You can eat wherever you want today. You have all the options. Sometimes it takes more time deciding where to eat than actually going to eat itself. You can read what you want at the touch of a button. There's an app for that. You can make it easier. You can streamline it. You can join endless clubs, endless sports, endless activities. And that doesn't even touch the endless entertainment that's at your fingertips every day. All the music in all the world you have access to. All the TV shows in all the world you have access to. All the YouTube videos in all the world. We have so many options. So we have an increased amount of options. You have so much time. I have so much time. There's a website, did you know this? There's a website that you can literally enter, like if you want to see how much time it will take you to binge watch something on TV, you can enter the show and it will automatically calculate for you how much of your life you will spend watching it. And so one of the shows that I really enjoyed watching, and it's probably why it popped in my mind because it was called 24. It was Kiefer Sutherland was in that. I really enjoyed how that show went, especially the first seasons. And I've watched every episode of that show. Okay? And let me tell you how much time I spent watching this show, according to this website. 22 days, 22 hours, and 23 minutes. And that's just one show. That's one show. I'm not going to tell you how many episodes I've watched of shows. Listen, we don't have less time. We have more things to do with our time. We have an abundance of time, but we also have an abundance of options. Verse 18, then he said, this is what I'll do. So he finally figured out what he'll do with all of his abundance. I will tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. You notice he's not content with how much he has? He needs to now do so much more so he can store so much more, so he can have so much more. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be happy. See, we always fall into this greed trap of if I have more of some resource, and in this case, we're talking about time, then I will be happy. And Jesus is saying, don't fall into that. Because even though we have more leisure time than ever before, which we do, I hope if you don't walk away with anything, I want you to walk away with don't believe the lie that you don't have time, because you do. What that's done, though, is it's created more complexities. Now we have more freedom. Now we have to make some decisions. And we have opportunity to make some foolish decisions and some wise decisions. So I'm going to touch on two complexities. There's probably more. But one of the things I've noticed over the last maybe 15 years or so is this, debate between should we spend money on gifts for like experiences or on more stuff? Every one of you feels that way around Christmas time. You're like, we don't need more stuff. But then you start to think, but what we need is experiences. That's what we're going to buy our kids. That's what we're going to ask grandma to pay for, Like and there's some value to that, but I want everybody to just think about this for a second. Sometimes as a parent, we think that if we provide more experiences for our kids, then we'll be happier. We'll feel better about our parenting. We'll feel better about ourselves. We'll have the family we are dreaming of if we just get more experiences. And so what do? Well, we try to give our kids what we didn't have. We get busy. We sign up for everything. We put them in every sport. Figuring out how to, wear a football helmet at kindergarten is super important, apparently, And so we just add all of these things. We add. We buy experiences. We're always looking to go spend money on something so we can have an experience. And I'm not saying those things are bad. I just want to point out something, okay? Sometimes what your kids need is just you. Dinner with you and nothing on the calendar. Nothing on the schedule. They don't need another weekend experience. They're not grateful for those anyway, right? Why? Because they want you. And that makes it tough because we see we need to, have more experiences instead of stuff. And we just got to watch out for the complexity that creates in modern time. The other thing I want to point out is this idea of information versus connection. My wife and I were in a conversation the other day, and you've probably had a conversation like this, but we're moving into a generation of, and I'm probably like this too, of people that look stuff up when we want to know something versus ask someone when we want to know something. Like we just do. Like if we want to know something, we're like, well, let me just look this up. And so what we've lost, and we didn't really want to lose this, what we've lost is, we've outsourced the need to talk to another person to get the information we need, and what's happened is we've lost connection. And now we are in a place where people are lonely. And people don't know how to connect with each other. And I'm not saying that having information at your fingertips is all bad. I'm saying if we always outsource our curiosity to the internet and to not a wise person that we're doing life with, there's a cost to that. It impacts our happiness. You have a surplus, more than enough time. You don't have a time shortage. You have a time surplus. But yet this still doesn't feel true, does it? It still feels like I'm talking in a hypothetical or a theoretical realm right now. Why does it seem like that? Why does it seem like, oh, I don't feel like I have more time? And let me just give you an illustration. Maybe this will help. Okay? In 1955, McDonald's, one of the revolutionary fast food chains, offered, a burger and fries and a soda, a Coca-Cola, with their drink. And do you know what the size of their large was? Anybody? Well, they didn't have a large. It was one size. It was about a 7-ounce cup. That was a large. To put that into perspective, today, this is a 12-ounce cup. This is the kid's size. Okay? So this was the only size you could get. And today, this is just the kid's size. Okay? And then this is a 16-ounce cup. This is the small now. The small drink here, which was about the size of a large at the beginning of 1980, okay? Well, today, if you want a large, you're going to get a 30-ounce cup. That's like 4 or 5 times more than the original large, right? And if you're really thirsty, you can go by your convenience store, which I'm actually unhappy with how big this is. I went into the gas station, and I was like, only 44 ounces. Isn't there like 64 or something like that? Okay, so the reason why we don't feel like we have more time is because as we've increased in the amount of free time we've had, something very, very important has also happened alongside of it. Our appetites for consuming time have also increased. And so what seemed like a good amount of time no longer seems like anything to us. And we have such an abundant appetite. We have increased appetites for spending time to do the things we want to do. The rich guy in this parable, did you notice how he speaks? He says, I will say to myself. He has a very self-centered, self-gratifying way of talking to himself. He's about himself. He's about being happy. He's about getting what he wants. He's greedy. It seems like we have more time than ever. We play more rounds of golf than anyone in human history. We go on fishing trips more than anyone in human history. We have more time to hunt than anyone in human history. We've watched more movies. We've went on more vacations. Here's what's happened. We've developed abundant appetites to spend time for ourselves, not on ourselves. There's a big difference between occupying your leisure with things for you and things that are meant to build you into a person. I'm not saying we don't need to spend time on ourselves. I'm all about soul care, getting some time to yourself so you can, be your best self and you can fill up and all of that. But I want to point you out to something. It's that shift for ourselves versus on ourselves. See, the purpose of spending time on ourselves is to control our appetites for sin, to put a finger on the troubling, symptoms and things and behaviors that we're doing. It's to prevent destructive behaviors. It's to help us with our moods. We think that going to a hobby, whereas it can be therapeutic, it's not actually on ourselves. We're not working on ourselves. We're just, in some ways, we're making our problem worse. Luke 12, 20 through 21 says, "But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself?' This is how it will be," Jesus said. You can take his words to the bank. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things. So that's any resource, right? Money, time. Whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Translation, don't ever be fooled to think that having more of anything, whether it's some kind of material thing or time for yourself, that will somehow equal happiness. There's all kinds of consequences with having a sort of a greedy nature towards spending time for ourselves. The increased options, the increased appetites, what do they result in? Decreased clarity and commitment to what really matters. Why are you unhappy? It's not that you don't have time. It's just you're not so clear on what to use your time for to bring you happiness. And Jesus clarifies for us in this text, and every time you get an opportunity to go to a funeral, I suggest that you go, because you will always have a reminder of how you should spend your time. Because when you go to a funeral, no one ever talks about someone's commitment to their hobbies. You know, man, Dad played so much golf, it really made an impact on my life. No one talks about like how much TV someone watched. No one even talks about like work accomplishments, really. What do people talk about at funerals when they talk about the people that they're remembering? They certainly don't say, and, my dad had, so many guns, and he spent his time figuring out how he could add to his collection. I mean, nobody talks about your collections. What do they talk about? People talk about the kind of person that they experienced in real time. And if they were the kind of person that made such an impression on them, and that experience was so positive and so impactful, they were the kind of people who didn't spend time for themselves. They were the kind of people who spent time for them, for others. Listen, Jesus is trying to warn us. You can spend all of your time for yourself, but you will not be rich, he says. And you will miss life and what really matters. How you choose to spend your most valuable resource, which in this case we're talking about time for many of us, what does that do? It reveals what's most important to you. And so whenever you say to the people in your life, whether it's your family or your church or whoever, whenever you say, I don't have time, what you're actually saying, I don't have time for you because I'm spending my time on me. Jesus offers us so much clarity. Actually, a few verses later, towards the end of chapter 12, he says, starting in verse 29, he says, and do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after such things, and your Father knows that you need them, but seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. How you spend your time is where your heart is, in addition to what you do with your material wealth. It reveals to us what's most important. So how can you commit to using your time? Because on the other side of using your time, not just on yourself, you will be able to access the kind of life that you're busy after. 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19 says, command those who are rich. If you haven't caught it yet, you have a rich abundance of time. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, wait for it, so that they may take a hold of the life that is truly life. Why are we not happy? Why are we becoming busier and not happier? It's because we are not adopting this approach to our time and our resources that Jesus is laying out for us. We don't believe we're rich in time. We don't believe we have time. And I'm here to say you do. And whenever you can, you should look for ways to give your time to others. You should be willing to share it. You should be willing to be generous with all the portions of abundance that you have. You should serve others. You should love others. All of that takes time. You should say yes to people, no to selfish pursuits. What does this look like at work? You could go to work and you could just kind of have a grumbling spirit there. Or you know what you could do? You could use that time to serve the people around you, to share with them whatever it is that they need. What about your church? I heard recently one pastor was talking about how he kept hearing this phrase over and over with people talking about the church, that they would say something like the church when speaking to the church, or they would say your church. People stopped saying our church. Why? Because if you're a part of a church, you are sharing yourself with it. It's not just the church we go to. It's not just their church or Pastor so-and-so's church. It's my church. And if it's my church, then I'm involved in it and I'm willing to share. I have time to do that. Now, maybe we've been talking about life groups, and actually the time to join a life group is really right now because we're going to close the sign-up portal in 48 hours. You might have said to yourself, I don't have the time. Okay. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Who are you going to share your life with? Maybe you should mentor someone. Maybe you're, I don't know, you might be retired. You might be on your second job, because you've put enough away, you're comfortable financially. What can you do? Mentor someone. Find somebody young in this church. Maybe when I say young, I'm talking about a 35-year-old parent trying to figure it out. I don't know. And go to them. Begin a relationship with them. We need you. We don't need you to lower your handicap at golf. We need wisdom. We need to know that there's people out there that have lived this journey. And parents, and grandparents maybe aunts, uncles, listen. We're always fighting this urge to get to the next season of our life so we can have what? Time. To do what we've sacrificed from doing for so long. And we start to daydream about it. Oh, when I can get back to that. And what happens is as you're raising kids, especially as they start to enter the teenage years, they start to become more independent and they don't need you as much. And then we start to feel the temptation of, I can just pull back a little bit, do a little bit more for myself, do a little bit more here. Don't do that. Your teenager needs you now more than ever. Listen, is there anything more important that you're going to do in your life than invest your time in your kids? Then teach them what they need to know, then input to them wisdom that there only is going to come from you. And when they're 35, 36, 37, and they're seeing a counselor, don't you want them to be able to say that my parents poured everything into me? That's what you want. You don't want more free time, because that's not happiness. And by the way, don't discourage new parents. I found myself doing this one time, and I don't need to do this, and I still probably do it sometimes, is whenever you see somebody with a lot of kids or like having a new kid, sometimes we say something really negative to them. Like, oh boy, here we go, What are we doing? Is there a greater calling and honor in life than to spend it pouring it out for your children, losing sleep for your children, taking your children wherever they need to go? What an honor. What a high calling to pour your cup out for your offspring. May we never discourage a parent and just go, oh, this is going to be hard and you're not. No. May we encourage them. Do you want to change your life? How you spend your time reveals what matters to you. You need to make a decision. It's really two decisions, but we're going to call it one. The first decision, you have to decide, I have time. Because some of you don't feel like you have it. So you got to go to work on that. But once you realize you have it, because you do, decide to spend your time for others. There is no other path to happiness than spending all of your resources, everything you have at your disposal to share your life with other people. That is going to net you the most fulfilling life you could ever imagine. I only say this because Jesus, the author of time, entered time, and he spent every ounce of his time for you. He showed you life. He showed you who God was. He showed you how to live. He showed you what sacrifice was. He showed you what love is. You were worth his most valuable resource, his time on earth, his time on the cross. God gave everything. He was killed for you and for me so that we could have abundant life. Don't ever fall into the trap of thinking that more for yourself is the pathway to abundant life. It's more like Jesus. A.W. Tozer once said, and I like this, when you kill time, remember, it has no resurrection. We have so much time, and we don't get it back. Don't spend your time on yourself. It's foolish. It'll lead to unhappiness. Oh, you'll have some things. You'll have some cars and collections. You'll have a really good swing. You'll be a good shot. You have a 401k, maybe many of those. Maybe you have read several articles. Maybe you'll be current on what's happening in the world, but are you current with what's happening with your 14-year-old daughter? Are you current with what's going on in your wife's week? What if you spent your time for others? You know what would happen? It would change your life. You'd be more content. You would have more peace. You would be able to lay down the guilt that we carry around so much, and we try to kind of numb ourselves with spending time on ourselves. You have the opportunity to be like Jesus to your family, to your friends, to your church, to anyone in your path. And if you choose to do that, you will find life. Maybe you don't know Jesus. You'll never find a better path to follow. Before you can decide to spend your time on other people, maybe you need to decide to surrender your life to him. And if you need to talk to somebody about that today, that's your first decision. We invite you to come back to the 103, this part of the room. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Would you stand? I'm going to pray. God, thank you so much for, God, just the opportunity right here to hear Jesus' teaching. And we have a decision to make. We can decide to put our faith in his teaching and apply it to how we use our time and use our resources, or we can choose to not believe that it will provide us the abundant life that we're looking for. And so every person in this room, I pray they would hear you speak right now. How can they use their time for others? How can they be more like you? In Jesus' name I pray.